Imagine this. French President Emmanuel Macron lands in China for a high-profile state visit. Cameras flash, handshakes are exchanged, and then boom, the headlines explode. Airbus, Europe's crown jewel in aviation, has just secured a jaw-dropping $20 billion order from Chinese airlines. The deal is massive. It includes 160 brand-new aircraft, enough to fill the skies with Airbus logos for years to come. For France, it was a diplomatic victory. For China, it was proof of growing influence in global aviation. And for Airbus, it wasn't just a contract, it was a coronation. This was the moment they officially overtook Boeing as the world's largest civil aircraft manufacturer. Think about the scale for a second. If each of those planes were lined up nose to tail, they'd stretch nearly 30 kilometers. That's longer than Manhattan. News outlets rushed to cover the story, investors cheered, and it seemed like Airbus and China were entering a golden age of cooperation. Everyone assumed the next step was obvious: more factories in China, deeper partnerships, and an even bigger slice of the world's fastest-growing aviation market. But then, out of nowhere, Airbus made a move nobody expected. Instead of doubling down on China, they turned their gaze elsewhere, to India. The plans for a new Chinese factory? Scrapped. In its place, an announcement: a brand new aircraft parts facility would rise in India. The world was stunned. Why would Airbus walk away from a partner that had just handed them $20 billion? What could India possibly offer that China didn't? And was this a bold masterstroke? Or a dangerous gamble? That's the mystery we're about to unpack. But to understand Airbus's risky pivot, we first need to rewind and look at how its biggest rival, Boeing, stumbled, and how Airbus seized its chance to climb to the top. For decades, Boeing was the undisputed king of the skies. From the iconic 747 jumbo jet to the sleek 787 Dreamliner, Boeing symbolized American engineering and global aviation dominance. At its peak, the company controlled over half of the global aircraft market. If an airline wanted reliability, prestige, and cutting-edge design, Boeing was the first call. But then came the crash, literally. In 2018, a brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8 operated by Lion Air plunged into the sea off Indonesia. 5 months later, another MAX 8, this time from Ethiopian Airlines, met the same tragic fate. Together, the two disasters claimed 346 lives. Investigators uncovered what Boeing had tried to keep quiet: design flaws in the flight control system and poor communication with both airlines and regulators. The fallout was catastrophic. The entire 737 MAX fleet was grounded worldwide for nearly 2 years, an unprecedented move in aviation history. Airlines canceled orders. Regulators piled on scrutiny. Passengers began to question whether Boeing planes were even safe to fly. And just as Boeing was trying to claw back its reputation, 2024 hit like a hammer. In the first month of the year alone, 5 separate incidents involving Boeing jets made global headlines: engine fires, in-flight malfunctions, and in one shocking case, a cabin door blowing off mid-air. More than 15 countries imposed flight bans or restrictions on Boeing aircraft. Imagine a food brand suddenly pulled off supermarket shelves across the world. That's what it meant for Boeing. Trust had evaporated, and in the vacuum, Airbus stepped in. Airlines looking for safer, more reliable options turned to Airbus without hesitation. Orders surged, confidence soared, and by the early 2020s, Airbus had overtaken Boeing as the new global leader. This shift wasn't just about engineering, it was about timing. As Boeing stumbled, Airbus was right there to capture the market. And nowhere was this momentum more visible than in China, a country that seemed ready to crown Airbus as its long-term aviation partner. But that only makes Airbus's sudden pivot away from China more shocking. To understand why this matters, we need to look at just how massive and strategic China's aviation market really is. When it comes to aviation, no market in the world shines brighter than China. For Airbus, China wasn't just a customer, it was the ultimate prize. Think about this. China has the world's largest population, a rapidly growing middle class, and a hunger for air travel that seems unstoppable. Families who once traveled by overnight train are now booking budget flights. Business trips that once meant days on the road now take just a few hours in the air. And the numbers are staggering. China is expected to need over 9,000 new aircraft by 2042, representing one of the biggest aviation expansions in history. On top of that, its aviation services market, things like maintenance, training, and airport support, is forecast to hit $541 billion. Airbus knew this early on and planted deep roots. In 2008, it opened a final assembly line in Tianjin, China, the first outside Europe. That factory rolled out its first A320 in 2009 and has been steadily upgraded ever since. In 2019, Airbus signed a $38 billion deal with Chinese airlines, and in 2023, the headline-grabbing $20 billion order followed. The message seemed clear. Airbus and China were building a long-term marriage, and it wasn't just numbers on a balance sheet. Thousands of Chinese engineers, factory workers, and managers trained and worked alongside Airbus teams. Local suppliers were pulled into the global supply chain. It was more than a business deal. It was a partnership that wove Airbus into the fabric of China's aviation dreams. That's why the recent pivot stunned so many. For years, Airbus invested billions, built trust, and created decades of goodwill in China. Walking away from a third factory there wasn't just a business move. It risked unraveling years of careful relationship building. So why take that risk? The answer lies in a new contender, an underdog with enormous potential, India. Just as the world thought Airbus was locking itself into China's future, the company made a sharp turn toward India. On the surface, it might look surprising. India's aviation industry has always been seen as emerging rather than dominant, but in the past few years, growth has been explosive. Domestic air travel in India grew by nearly 50% in just 1 year, making it the fastest-growing aviation market on Earth. Crowded airports from Delhi to Bangalore are straining under demand, while new terminals and runways are being built at record speed. And then came the jaw-dropper. India's airlines placed a record-breaking $30 billion order with Boeing, one of the biggest in aviation history. Overnight, India signaled to the world. It wasn't just a big market, it was a battleground. For Airbus, the logic was clear. India has a young population, with millions of first-time flyers every year, rising incomes, and a government eager to turn aviation into a global strength. Prime Minister Modi's Make in India campaign offers tax breaks, land, and fast-track approvals for foreign manufacturers. In other words, India isn't just buying planes. It's inviting companies to build them locally. So, Airbus made its move. Instead of building another factory in China, it announced a brand new parts facility in India. The gamble, diverting resources away from the world's largest aviation market to bet on one that's still catching up. The visuals couldn't be more different. In China, gleaming assembly lines, years of established networks, and a proven supply chain. In India, crowded terminals, construction dust at new airports, and government ministers proudly cutting ribbons at aviation summits. It's bold, it's risky, and it raises a burning question. Is Airbus chasing future growth or walking into a minefield? To answer that, we need to look inside the boardrooms of Airbus and unpack the strategic calculations behind this dramatic pivot. Inside Airbus's boardrooms, the decision to shift from China to India wasn't made lightly. It was the kind of move where every angle, economic, political, and technological, was weighed against enormous stakes. First, there's the competition factor. Boeing already scored big in India with that $30 billion mega order. If Airbus stayed too focused on China, it risked ceding the fastest-growing aviation market to its rival. For a company that just pulled ahead of Boeing globally, losing ground in India was simply unacceptable. Second, diversification. Airbus executives have watched how quickly politics can reshape business. In recent years, Europe's relationship with China has become more complicated. Tensions over trade, technology, and geopolitics are rising. By putting more eggs in the Indian basket, Airbus spreads its risk. It's not just about building planes, it's about building resilience. Then, there are the Make in India incentives. Tax breaks, accelerated permits, and promises of prime industrial land mean Airbus could cut costs and speed up production. It's a tempting package, one that China, with its maturing economy and stricter regulations, can't match as easily anymore. But here's the tension. Canceling a planned third factory in China risks more than production capacity. It risks trust. Chinese leaders don't take kindly to being sidelined after decades of partnership. Airbus has built its reputation in Asia on reliability and commitment. Pulling resources could make Beijing question whether Airbus is truly a long-term partner. It's easy to picture the boardroom debate on one side, maps of India with arrows showing new airports, rising demand, and fresh incentives. On the other, graphs of China's massive, guaranteed market, paired with stern warnings about political fallout. In the end, Airbus chose growth potential over security. But this is no guaranteed win. Betting on India means betting that its factories, workers, and systems can meet the demanding precision of aerospace manufacturing. And that brings us to the next big question. Can India actually deliver? This is where Airbus's gamble starts to look risky. Because while India's aviation market is booming, its manufacturing base isn't yet built for aerospace precision. Unlike China, which spent decades building world-class factories and supply chains, India's economy leans heavily on services and small to medium manufacturers. Making phone parts or auto components is one thing, but building aircraft parts demands a different level of perfection. A single flaw in a jet engine or fuselage panel can cost lives. We've seen this struggle before. Take India's Tejas fighter jet program. It began in the 1980s, soaked up billions of dollars, and dragged on for decades. Yet even today, the jets face reliability issues and have failed multiple tests. If India's own defense industry struggles to deliver military planes after 40 years, can it suddenly scale up to meet Airbus's strict global standards? Airbus knows the risks. Precision machining, advanced materials, and global safety certifications aren't things that can be built overnight. It will take massive investment in training, importing foreign talent, and building new infrastructure just to get India's factories ready. And every delay or misstep doesn't just cost money. It could damage Airbus's reputation as the safer, more reliable alternative to Boeing. This is why Airbus's move isn't just about selling planes. It's about building an entire ecosystem in India almost from scratch. The stakes are enormous. If it works, India becomes a new aerospace hub. If it fails, Airbus risks falling behind in both China and India at the same time. And as if the technical challenges weren't enough, there's another layer of risk waiting politics. Because in India, being welcomed at first doesn't always mean you'll be safe later. Even if Airbus can overcome India's manufacturing hurdles, there's another danger lurking: politics. India is famous for rolling out the red carpet when global giants first arrive. But history shows that once companies become profitable, the treatment often changes. Take Xiaomi, the Chinese phone maker. It was once India's #1 smartphone brand. Then came sudden tax raids, frozen accounts, and investigations that nearly crippled its business. Or look at Apple, which faced years of regulatory headaches before finally expanding production. Even Nokia, once a titan in India, saw its factories shuttered after massive tax disputes. This unpredictability makes India a double-edged sword. The government promises fast approvals, tax breaks, and land access, but those same rules can shift overnight. For a high-stakes industry like aerospace, where stability and trust are everything, the risk isn't just financial, it's reputational. Imagine Airbus pouring billions into Indian facilities, only to face a sudden audit, legal fight, or new regulation that stalls operations. Unlike selling smartphones, an aircraft supply chain can't just be picked up and moved. Once Airbus commits, it's locked in. This means Airbus isn't only betting on India's workers and infrastructure, it's betting on India's political stability and business environment. And that's far harder to predict. So now the big question becomes, is this bold pivot a stroke of genius, or a dangerous gamble that could backfire? Airbus's story here is full of paradox. On one side, we have a $20 billion deal with China, 160 planes, global headlines, and proof that Airbus had overtaken Boeing. On the other side, we see a sudden pivot to India, canceling a new factory in China and shifting resources toward a market that's still untested in aerospace manufacturing. It's a decision that raises the ultimate question: is Airbus chasing visionary growth or walking into a storm? The opportunity is undeniable. India is young, ambitious, and flying more than ever before. If Airbus can establish itself now, it could dominate the skies for decades to come. But the risks are just as real: manufacturing challenges, political unpredictability, and the possibility of alienating China, the very partner that helped Airbus rise above Boeing in the first place. This is the high-wire act of global business. Sometimes the boldest moves pay off spectacularly. Other times they unravel in ways no one saw coming. So, What do you think? Did Airbus make the right decision to bet on India, or is this a gamble that could cost them their lead? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the biggest business gambles of our time, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story about how companies and countries are reshaping the world economy. Because in aviation and in business, the race is never just about who flies higher. It's about who can stay in the air the longest.